Hello, everybody. This is John Palmer, Dutch Stock Speed Selling, and this is Raging Verbalist number 234. For those of you keeping track, if you're new, welcome. If you are a veteran, glad that you made it back. And hit that like button if you're on YouTube, and subscribe if you wanted to make sure that you never miss an episode. It's exciting and all of those kinds of things. And of course, we're on Facebook group, which is Position to Win Book group. So, and with me as always to ask me the tough questions, as if you were sitting there right in front of me, is the ever lovely Sandra. Sandra, welcome.
Hello, how are you doing today, this summer solstice?
Well, I just flew in from Denver, and no, I'm not going to say my arms are tired, but I'm flight was delayed hours and hours and hours. Didn't get home until midnight, and here we are. But the show must go on. So doing okay. And we are talking about an important topic because of the summer solstice and other things. So what are we going through today?
All right, so we're talking about your solar panel adventure. So how long ago did you get solar panels installed?
Time flies when you're generating electricity, I guess is the way to say it. Yeah, so 10 years ago, 2014, I finally got my solar panels and my array put on the roof, and it was quite a process, to say the least, which we're going to dive into. But yeah, it's been now 10 years, and that's one of those kind of things. I should point out that the best day of the year. I mean, some people celebrate various holidays. We celebrate the longest day of the year in our aperture. The ball in the sky changes, even though the planet's spinning at an angle. So June 20th, 21st are usually the best days for the most solar production. So yes, we are excited about having them up there.
All right. And how did you decide to get solar panels?
Well, when you are in the golden state, you end up paying a lot for electricity. That's why whenever I would see these stupid analysis about how you could get an electric car and it would be cheaper than driving gas, well, if you're paying 8, 12, even now, I guess the average kilowatt per hour is 18 cents. What you'll discover is that California is now 32 and pushing to 35, with discussion of going to 55 cents a kilowatt. However, many years ago, I've got my office in my home. I had somebody work for me, and she believed that air conditioning not only was a godsend, but it was something that you had to put on and leave on. So even though I have 2 different air conditioning units, she wanted one in the office and would chill this thing out. And so when my electric bill hit $1,100, and that would not be 10 years ago, that would be more like 12 or 13 years ago, a month. And yes, that's a month. I said, this is nuts. I've got to figure this out. And then electricity was a lot cheaper than it is today.
And what was your journey to getting them like?
From the time that I decided I really wanted to get solar panels, I did what I always do, which is I started doing research. I used this thing called Goggle, as I like to call it. And I started looking around and trying to find out what was going on. At the time, there were even these things called magazines. So there was Home Power Journal and, all of these kind of really kind of wackadoodle deals. And everybody, of course, in these magazines told me about how amazingly wonderful it would be getting solar panels. Scant technical information. If you're going to get solar, if you're out there trying to make a decision about solar, and I did it by, let me just say my motives are pure. I'm not trying to stop an iceberg. I'm not trying to, the weeping crane or whatever the hell it is. I mean, it's all about the money. I mean, does the money work? Does it actually work? So it took me 30 months to actually put together the plan and get the damn panels on the roof. Now, part of it you could say is because of me, but here's the real insight. If you pay retail for solar panels, and you can pay actually above retail because nobody knows what the hell this stuff costs. If you pay retail, they will not pay off. You will not live long enough usually, or the panels won't live long enough, and you will have really wasted it. Now, you might have this mirage of saving money, but it would not be the smart thing to do. So yeah, it took me 30 months to go through the journey of getting the damn things up on the roof.
And how did you design your system?
So what I did was I started calling people, right? I'm Googling the crap out of this stuff, and I started finding all these solar installers. And at the time, state of California had just dropped their incentive a bit, which is previously if you produced a kilowatt, which by the way is 1,000 watts. So if you want to visualize it, and so and this may be even tough because they've kind of gone away, but you get 10 100-watt bulbs and you line them up, that's a kilowatt hour. So if you had them plugged in and turned on 10 light bulbs, you've got a kilowatt. So I started calling all of these various people and said, okay, well, let me tell you what I'm trying to do. And I paid for a guy to do an audit on my house. That was just a waste of money. He was convinced I needed to replace my windows, even though he was in the solar panel business, because windows were a higher margin item for him. And by the way, where I live, even though I have old windows, and yes, I would like to for aesthetic reasons or for maybe lifestyle reasons, but putting in windows is a money loser for where I live. It's just a money loser because you just don't lose that much. I mean, if I lived in the frozen tundra instead of the freaking desert, and maybe we would do it. So anyway, I ended up with 4 bad bids, and people had all kinds of wacky, crazy stuff, and people were coming up with numbers. And I actually found a site, and no, we don't get any commish off of this. I don't even know how they're doing now, but I found these guys at Solar or Wholesale Solar online, and started talking to these guys, and they gave me some insights. I ended up not buying the panels from them, but that's a whole longer story that we'll get into. But the end of the day, it took 4 really bad bids for me to say, wait a second, I think I'm going to end up having to be my own general contractor. Let me give you some reality. If you're sitting out there, those solar panels sit on top of this thing called your roof. I know this might be, groundbreaking. You might be spilling your, cocoa on yourself or something. And that means that, that's the foundation. And if you've ever built anything, you have to have a solid foundation. So you got to get over the fact that unless your roof is really new, you're going to have to replace that roof, and you're going to have a brand new roof to put those solar panels on. So it ended up getting much more involved. And the reason why none of these frickin' magazines, none of these people that I was talking to wanted to say that is that it made the deal look economically not viable, made it look really terrible. So I ended up having to do it myself and figure out what we need to do. No, I ended up having to hire a solar architect to figure this out, because that was like smart to get the professional, but I knew what I needed to do. And so, yeah, that's what I ended up doing. But 4 bad bids, I knew exactly how much money they were charging me, which, see, the wholesale solar guys kind of give me a sense of what the markup was on panels.
And how many panels did you end up with?
So the different bids I got, one guy said, if you get 16 panels, because in California we have a tiered electricity system, which means that you get a base rate, which is cheap. So that means you can run a hot plate and a portable radio, and everything else is, superfluous in their minds. So then you keep stepping up, and their gig was, well, we'll give you enough panels to keep you out of the dreaded, and this time they had 4 tiers, the dreaded tier 3 and 4. So one guy said all I needed was 8 panels, another said 16. I did the math myself, and I came up with so I didn't have an electric bill. So I had made excess power no matter what. So I ended up with 40 panels on my roof. And whenever I say that to people, there's a whole, holy shit, or I think in Russian is bouge moi, but it's like, oh my God, what are you, crazy? 40 panels? What are you powering there? So there, 40 panels.
All right. And do you have a battery backup system?
Question I get all the time when I tell people I have solar panels. Now, 10 years ago, the battery backups were ridiculous. They were not even viable, not even close. I've watched as battery backups have come into their own. My neighbor who across the street waited. I mean, he didn't get solar panels he saw my panels go in. He waited several years before he bit the bullet. But he ended up putting in battery backup. So the last time I had my solar guy come out, and yes, you will end up with a solar person, happened to be a guy. And I said, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to put the battery backup and attach it. And he goes, well, this is what it's going to cost you all in roughly. And when he told me $42,000, luckily, I've got a strong heart, and heard a lot of crazy numbers, but $42,000. Now, there is no way, unless somebody knows different math than I know, that ever pays off for me. Because even if I change to time of use and do all these other things, and charging, and I guess maybe if I was doing crypto mining or something, but it just doesn't make any sense. And I'd have to eat a lot healthier and really start taking care of myself. I mean, when I'm on Raging Verbalist, I'd have to just keep flossing just to make sure that I'm going to make it long enough to pay off that $42,000, because that's a whopper. Now, if they ever get it to where you could stick a battery on there and have a little buffer, and the reason why you need a battery backup, by the way, and the reason why it's of any interest, so that way you get a little more than just me ranting, but some sense, is that the battery allows you to then be off grid. In other words, if I had a little battery, which is what I told the guy, geez, doesn't somebody have a small battery, like for $5,000? So that way, when the power goes out, because I have very unreliable power, then I could actually power my house off of my grid, or off of the array. But the answer is no. Now, what that tells me is that when you're sitting out there wondering, well, geez, John, what are the things that everybody should be looking for? What should we be doing when we're looking at not necessarily solar panels, but when we're looking at our business? Well, what you should really be looking for is my book. And my book is Most Businesses Fail in the First 5 Minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it, position to win. And by the way, a lot of what I talk about here helped with the way I approached putting solar panels and doing everything else on my roof, because I knew that in the first 5 minutes, if I just went with the first pitch, done, I mean, I would be in serious trouble, and I would have paid probably 40% more than I ended up paying. So go check it out. You can get it at Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, wherever books are sold. You can get a physical copy. You can also go to the website, positiontowinbook.com, positiontowinbook.com, and I will sign it for you. You can get it digitally. It's available in all formats: Kindle, Nook, and Apple iBooks. And then also, when you're up in Amazon, you might want to check out Remote Work for a Better World, so you can figure out how to do things remotely. And if you have a mind to, and you want to get a little bit of rage every single day, get yourself a Raging Verbalist mug. Ooh, everything tastes just a little bit better, but a little bit more rageful when you do that. All right, Sandra, what is next?
All right. What are some of the myths of solar?
Well, yeah. So as I was reading all of these, and I'll just call them over the top bullshit, crazy agenda people, and they would say, and there is a truth to this, is that if you're in the northern hemisphere, I'm in the northern hemisphere, what you want to do is you want to have your panels facing south, because that southern sun, it gives you the best. It's called aperture. You get it. Aperture's like how wide open the lens is, and that's a great idea. Well, there was a lot of myth about that, and I have to thank a guy in New Mexico from Wholesale Solar who pulled up instead of sitting out there in front of my house with a clipboard going, oh boy, these are, because they were doing the old grumpy salesperson about solar. And the guy said, look at your house. You've got this amazing eastern facing roof. Again, I can't change. This is the other part. You can't change how your roof is put together. They don't design roofs for solar. I can just tell you that now. So whenever I hear all of these people who are really hyper greenies, I go, okay, then why aren't you working on better designs to capture the rays of the sun? But they don't do that. So south facing is best, but really that's what they would say. That's the only place to put panels, but I couldn't put enough panels. So that turned out to be erroneous for my installation. So frankly, where I live and what I do, if they in fact let me sell power for what it's really worth, not the pittance that they do, because I have to sell it to them at a super wholesale rate. Well, I'd put panels everywhere. I mean, even bolt them on wherever you need to bolt them on, because there's a lot that can be done. So all of that turned out to be erroneous. The other thing that turned out to be erroneous is that that this was free. Oh hey, you have free energy. Well, I spent $72,500 all in, had to go out and get that, finance it, put it together to do that. Now, was it worth it? Well, for me, it has been, because I haven't gotten a traditional electric bill, but I'm not stupid enough to think that, well, I'm not covering that 72.5 plus interest over the life of these things and going through it as it goes on. Besides which, whenever they do an appraisal of my property, I am going to go through a rather interesting process and provide them with the Department of Energy. You can go and look it up yourself. The DOE has a beautiful spreadsheet which allows you to figure out how much your panels are going to produce and therefore put a value associated with it. So there's a lot of myths like that. And of course, we always celebrate June 20th and 21st.
All right. And what are your thoughts about leasing versus buying?
Well, if you ever get one of these deals where, you're walking through a mall, if you walk through a mall anymore, but if you're walking out of the Costco or something and they say, hey, you have solar panels, or somebody says, hey, we can lease them to you, and it's a great deal. What happens is that you don't own the panels, and also you sign a long-term contract. So you really don't get the benefit. Maybe you get a reduction because you don't have to pay for it. There is no free lunch. I'm not a big fan of leasing them because it makes it very hard to sell your house. In fact, there's a real estate agent that I follow in Phoenix who she will not represent houses that have solar at all. I mean, imagine in Phoenix, Valley of the Sun, and you need sun for solar, but she won't even represent houses that have solar. So leasing, I think, is a canard, but it really depends upon the money and the cost of financing to put them up and how smart you are. And this gets back to, once again, whatever you pay is whatever you're going to finance. So make sure that you get the wholesale idea of this thing. Most importantly is that when you negotiate with these folks, you find out what it costs per panel installed on your roof and what is going to go on, because there's a lot of details that go into this thing. No, I don't have a cheat sheet. No, I don't have a spreadsheet to give you, but I'm going to tell you, get out your thinking cap and start writing all of this stuff down. And what you'll probably do, because most people are really lazy. I'm not saying our listeners, I'm not saying our viewers are lazy, Sandra, but I'm saying most people are just freaking lazy. And the last thing they want to do is actually have to go and do some ciphering and figure this thing out. But you absolutely must do that. And you have to have somebody prove to you that leasing would be better than buying and getting some kind of financing.
So what are the pain points and pitfalls of solar installation?
Well, one of the things that the happy, happy, joy, joy bullshit magazines, the greenie boys, never tell you is that, they get dusty. Turns out that there's this thing on this planet of particulates in the atmosphere, and they fall on your roof. They fall everywhere, right? This is why, middle of nowhere, people are sweeping out this and sweeping out that. So you have to actually have them professionally cleaned. And by the way, if you think you're just going to take a hose and hose them off, boy, you better think about that, because again, water has all kinds of crap in it. And if you've ever seen little water stains that come out of on your beautiful glassware that comes out of the dishwasher, well, imagine those mineral deposits are going to hurt that. If you want to see the ultimate, is go watch this movie Oppie. It's about it's about Mars. So so you got to keep your head wrapped around that. And I'm going to ruin it for you, so it's a spoiler alert. But they have solar panels, and they needed to figure out how to get the solar panels cleaned on Mars. And frankly, it's a very good explanation of that.
And would you recommend everyone install solar panels?
Well, it depends a lot on your variables. I mean, if you don't use a lot of power and all of that, then probably not. But if you live in Maine, if you live in Chicago, you live in Washington State or something, there's still people installing them. But the effectiveness means that you should have a lot of sun. And if you have a lot of sun, that's a big plus. The other thing is, what does it cost you to buy electricity? Because I was just in Colorado yesterday. I have friends who are there. My brother's there. I have businesses there. The problem is that they have cheap electricity compared to California. And that means that it comes down to this, the finances work. So I think that there's a lot of value in getting solar panels. There is a certain excitement that you can get. I mean, it's not like, my wife and I go and sit there and watch the meter running backwards. I mean, ooh, what an exciting thing to do. Hey, bring the kids around. Hey, look at the meter running backwards. So I think that it depends on a lot of variables in your situation. If you're not going to live there for long, probably not. If you really understand what you've got, that's important. But the other thing that you really want to get your head wrapped around, and I never thought I was going to be this guy, but I have been called the Watt Nazi by a good friend of mine because I look at ways to save energy every place I possibly can. And I still have a few indulgences, like I have a plasma screen TV. Yeah, I know it's one of those, but it's because it has a great picture and it's still hanging in there. But when I replace it, I'll probably cut some more watts out. So you really want to make sure that you understand why you're doing it and lay out the variables that fit for you.
And since you've had them for 10 years, was it all worth it?
Well, if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have told you pain in the ass. I mean, it took 6 weeks for the city that I live in to send us an inspector out to actually come and look at the installation and give me the approval to actually turn on my array. So is it worth it? 10 years afterwards, yes, I think it was very well worth it, especially when I sell the house and I show and prove to the appraisers, because that's another problem, is that since most people don't keep track of their numbers, they don't have a way to do that. They probably are not going to get the value on the back end. I should be able to recapture a bunch of that money, even though I've been, saving on electricity, but I'm still paying on the money, but I should be able to get most of it back. So after 10 years, yes, I really like that. Are there things I wish were easier to deal with? First off, finding somebody who can fix your solar system. I had a gateway, fancy way of saying it's like a router that keeps track of all this stuff because they're producing data while we're talking, or it's producing data while we're doing this, and I'm using technology in my office. I'm using my own electricity. So in some ways that's really cool. Some of these things have not ironed out, and if you ask me, it's going to take some more time and some better thought processes, because most of the time, that's what lags, and nobody's having that serious discussion. And oh, by the way, the state of California, not only are they raising electricity prices, but they're cutting the value of each kilowatt that gets sent back to the grid. So they're actually incentivizing by charging more, but disincentivizing by not buying the electricity at anything close to what it should be sold at. So all in, that's my journey of the solar panels. Has it been worth it? Yes. For 10 years, I have not had to pay an electric bill. Yes, I get money back, but it's a pittance compared to what I would like it to be. But most importantly, I wanted to share this with everybody because there's so much hype and bullshit about this. If I hear one more time about a guy who says, oh, there's this new solar panel that's going to be much better. So here's my final commentary. When I put them on my roof, I had some knucklehead, and I would call him other things, but tell me, John, solar panels are improving in efficiency at a compounded rate of 1 to 3% a year. Well, if you take 1 to 3% and you project that out for 10 years, which is where I'm at, that means I would need fewer solar panels and they would be significantly better. I'm here to tell you that really hasn't happened in reality land. So most of what you hear out there, there's too much hype, there's too much nonsense, there's too much bullshit. And the fanboys who are out there just love to bang the drum and tell you how it's going to be this magical world. And you know what? It's all about the money. It's all about doing the numbers. And if they work for you, that's great. It works for me, and I've enjoyed it, and it has been worth that effort. And hopefully what this has done is given you a better insight so you make better decisions. Put comments down below. Tell me some of the fun you've had. Most of the time, whenever I talk to people who are solar panel devotees, I guess, is that they can't shut the bullshit off for even 20 seconds and have a real conversation. And I always look at people and say, well, how many panels do you have? What did it take? And do you know your numbers? And the answer is usually they don't know their numbers. So for that, I know what our number is. This has been number 234 for Raging Verbalist. And for myself, John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Speed Selling, and the ever lovely Sandra. Go and have a great one. Maybe have a wonderful solar day, and we'll see you on the next Raging Verbalist.